Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Daily Manchester United. You've had a weekend to recover from that FA Cup win. I don't know why you have to recover from it, but we didn't play that particularly well. And of course, St. Maguire to the rescue, scoring from maybe a yard and a half offside. Anyway, we're through to the fifth round. My name is Kieran McGinley. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by our new host in Tom Cairns. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hello, Kieran. Hello to everyone. Yes, and for what's been a rather dreadful season for Manchester United so far, it is safe to say that. We had some luck on our side on Friday night against Leicester with that offside goal, which should have been disallowed. But as it was, United progressed through to the last 16, effectively, the fifth round of the FA Cup. At the time of recording, we don't know who we'll be facing against. We have an idea of who we want to get, but we won't find out until due course. But yeah, the game itself, it just kind of felt flat, didn't it? And it certainly wasn't a convincing performance, but I think given how our season has gone, we had to expect it, Kieran. And I just hope that, with this so-called break that we've got of 9 days before we face Tottenham away, it's got to be better than what we've done.
Has to be. I mean, yeah, we pretty much kind of really crawled over the line against Leicester, is lack for a better word. I mean, yes, we managed to get ourselves back into the game, but let's face it, all of the goals, well, the first 2 goals, I should say, lacking quality. They were both sort of tap homes. Bobby De Cordova-Reid scoring a few minutes before half-time after Onana makes a save, but it just perfectly is in line with De Cordova-Reid's head, where he can tap in from about 3, maybe 2 yards out. There were calls for offside, but he looked pretty much level, so wasn't ever going to be thrown offside. Of course, no VAR in this game, and that became relevant towards the end of the game. We got back into it through Joshua Zirkzee, though, who managed to come off the bench and score within 4 minutes. Again, another tap in from a little bit of bobbling around, but he manages to keep the cool head, score the goal. And as we've already said, Harry Maguire, from a free kick, managing to, well, not only just beat the offside trap, but maybe another word might be more handy. But he's there, he gets the header and gets us into the fifth round hat at the very least. And yes, you're right, we don't know who we've drawn yet, but there's plenty of teams out there I'm sure we'll discuss in due course. But yeah, it just seemed like a game where Leicester were on top for quite a lot of this match. And unfortunately, obviously, Dorgu made an FA Cup debut, but again, Højlund was one of those that really struggled. And he's one of those strikers that, yeah, he's very tenacious. He'll get in behind. If you try and get a ball through to him, he will try and chase it down. But what he's not as good as doing, as Zirkzee seems to be the better striker at doing, is holding up the play, is allowing and bringing other players in. That being said, how much can you expect of a striker who's normally used to getting in behind the defenders when none of those balls are coming like that? Actually, what's happening is most balls are coming over the top, ready to be headed down for someone to then latch onto. And Højlund is sort of proving time and time again that he's not that kind of striker, Tom.
Well, he hasn't been clinical all season. Last season I was impressed with him despite Man United's injury woes. But I don't know what's gone into him this season because he has played regularly, but he hasn't been getting the goals away. And as for Zirkzee, well, I think most of it has been pretty flat by his standards compared to how he got on at Bologna last season. But it goes to show that United had been in need of a striker this season to get them 20 goals across all comps. That's what they need right now. Obviously, the transfer window is closed, so I don't know where the goals are exactly going to be coming from. But if anything...
Ahmad.
Yeah, well, Ahmad, yeah. Well, the thing is, Ahmad's not even a striker, he's a winger, or sometimes playing in that right wing-back role, which I think suits him very, very well. But more on Zirkzee and Højlund, it doesn't convince me in any way that we're going to be getting, goals of double figures even, let alone 20 goals or whatever. So you're just having to rely on other midfielders like Bruno Fernandes, who's going to be contributing a lot. He has contributed a lot this season, Bruno, despite the disciplinary problems he's had with the sending offs and all that, really. So United's problems just, mount and mount and mount. And I just don't know when the hoodoo is going to end, really. I mean, we've got the Europa League last 16 to come, but given that we're not having to play in the preliminary knockout phase, which saves us having to play those 2 extra games, because we would have been playing on Thursday this coming, had we finished outside the top 8 in the Europa League phase. So hats off to Ruben Amorim for that, for the way he's galvanised that team in some way. But now, in terms of the next game against Tottenham, on the back of the performance we saw against Leicester, which was far from promising, we are relying on moments to get us out of jail. And it's a problem that has been around at Old Trafford for far too long. We need to see consistent performances week in, week out. And I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, and we've discussed on the show previously about mentality issues and keeping us in a game, but Ruben Amorim has said two interesting things in the last couple of weeks, or at least the last week or so, being in a press conference and saying no, in terms of transfers in, it was his decision not to sign any further players above of Dorgu and Heaven in this January transfer window. He's sort of saying that he needs that time to gel with the squad. He needs that time to sort of prepare for the summer window rather than go through all the funds in January. I mean, if we're worried about funds at Manchester United, it's a bit of an issue at that point. We've had PSR looming over us. We managed to keep Garnacho even with that PSR threat. Rashford now out on loan to Aston Villa. We've now got Anthony at loan at Real Betis, where he's picked up 2 man of the match performances out in La Liga. Say what you will about that. I think it's been tough. It's been tough watching it. I think you'll agree with that one, Tom. Even though we got the wins to back us up here, we were so formidable against an Arsenal side that probably should have won the third round tie. Yet, we go down to 10 men. Obviously, Dalot suspended for this FA Cup game in the 4th round, so he wasn't able to play. So Dorgu comes in. Mazraoui then, almost as if he becomes the next centre-back. It was quite a weird one for Mazraoui. I have seen him dip into that centre-back role. Maybe that's one for the future because, of course, Martinez, since at least I've been on the podcast, an MCL injury, immediate cruciate ligament injury, will ruling out for the rest of the season. And normally with a cruciate ligament injury, you're looking at 3, 4, maybe 5 months. So we could be looking at the start of next season. He might miss the first couple of games, but obviously physio team will keep us up to date with that one. But yeah, it's just one of those unfortunate things. Injuries he picked up, no malice at all. But when the knee goes one way and you go the other, it normally ends up with ligament damage. So we'll be out with Martinez for the rest of the season. I feel like Mazraoui can drop in there because defensively he's been one of our better players.
Well, Mazraoui has been one of the bright spots for Manchester United overall this season. He has had some stinkers along the way. I'm just trying to remember games that he's had stingers. I think Bournemouth was one of those that he had an absolute dreadful performance against. But it sounds like in that centre-back role that he has had to be put into, it seems like he's got on the job and done it well. And same with Lenny Yoro as well. I thought Lenny Yoro put in a respectable shift by his standards. But, with Patrick Dorgu in his first game, from what I've heard, it sounds like he's had an okay game, despite the fact that he'd been played out of position compared to how he's normally played and how he played for Lecce in the last 18 months. So Patrick Dorgu definitely needs time to gel into the team and gel into the system that Amorim's trying to put together, because what we've got to remember is how many of those Manchester United players are Amorim's picks? Because I can't imagine that many of them would have been his picks. Let's just say he's starting the club from scratch or starting the squad from scratch. How many of those Manchester United players would be in Amorim's first 11? I wouldn't say a lot.
No, fair enough. You'd probably say, Mazraoui was probably one in there. Dorgu, obviously, he's brought in, so that makes sense. Heaven, he's brought in. I totally agree. There's probably you could count on one hand how many players he'd want to keep in that side. But we can talk a little bit more about that after we come back from this quick commercial break.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
I must correct myself because Dalot did play in that game. So I'm not sure how he got a red card and still played in the... You know what? I'm not going to question it. We're through to the 5th round. Don't question it, Kieran. We'll be absolutely fine. On the back of your question there, Tom, which poses a really interesting one, after that FA Cup performance, we scraped through how many of those players would Amorim want to keep? Well, I think he's wanting to keep Maguire. He's extended his contract. He's triggered the contract clause for an additional year. So clearly he wants Maguire around. And I'll be completely honest with you. I think Maguire in a back three has been playing his best football at Manchester United. He's been a menace in the air. We brought him in for, his calmness on the ball. Hasn't quite worked out that way. I think technically he can be good, but I think under pressure he can struggle a little bit. But being a part of that back three, I think eases that pressure across that back line entirely. You've got 3 centre-backs there, all of whom can really put in the shift. De Ligt didn't start this game, in fact. And all the back three, well, in a bizarre twist, the back three were not changed in this match. We know Amorim likes to substitute a centre-back at some point in the game. But no, the 3 centre-backs that started that game finished the game. Dorgo obviously has just come in. Agate... I think we've got mixed feelings in the podcast about Agate. Yes and no. I'm on the side of yes. I think he's been a good signing. He's starting to grow into that role. And, creatively, he's limited in that sense, but I think he's a really good ball winner. Think back to Adama Traore, he managed to get cynical foul, yes, and somehow managed to come off worse in that, despite making the tackle. Nevertheless, I think he's been good. Fernandes, goes without saying, he would make the side. The team probably should be built around Fernandes. And that's a worrying thing because he's now 29, 3-year contract signed at the start of this season. And then, the striker problem. You've got Højlund and Xerxes. Well, we've had a game already where Kobbie Mainoo started up top. So I think that answers your question about whether Amorim has any faith in those strikers up top.
Well, if he's struggling for options, what about those from the academy? Can he not give someone else a chance in that role? Because if they are a recognised striker and they've been playing as a striker in their under-18 squad, is it worth giving them a go? I think for a game against Tottenham of its magnitude, it's probably a stretch too far. I know Tottenham have been playing appallingly this season, but it's a risk to really throw a youngster 18 years of age. But bearing in mind, you think about Louis van Gaal when he threw Marcus Rashford in there last minute against Michelin and 3 days later against Arsenal for his Premier League debut. Yep. We all know what happened in that. So I think for a time like we are going through, the eggs in the basket are going to be on the Europa League anyway, because it's our only route, really, to gain into Europe. I think it'll be harder for us to get into Europe by winning the FA Cup, because I think that the opposition that we're potentially going up against will be harder than those in the Europa League. That's my opinion anyway. It goes back to what I was saying about the strikers. We're lacking options. So I think in the summer, when it comes round to it, a striker is what we need, but it really could depend where we end up finishing the season, because if we're not in Europe at all, who's going to want to come to Man United?
Well, yeah, that's the worrying thing, isn't it? You're right. Hadn't thought about that, actually. If we don't win the Europa League, we've got 0 European football whatsoever. And at the rate this is going, I mean, I know that the Premier League has been absolutely crazy so far. The fact that at one point we were 4 points off the top 4 and we were down in sort of 13th, 14th. Now we're about 12 points, maybe even more off that top 4 race. So it's fair to say we're probably out of that race for now. It would be nice to get some European football, but you're right. If we lose out on European football, not only is that a vital source of income being lost, which Ineos are really precarious about right now, because obviously they're slashing funds at the bottom of the pyramid rather than the top, standard stuff. But at the same time, we lose that income stream of Champions League football or Europa League football even. That could raise a few alarm bells. And then the knock-on effects on that, you're right. Which players would come to the club that has no European football? It all sort of snowballs into this effect here that if we miss out on Europe this season, that could really put us in a bit of a sticky situation come July, August.
A blessing in disguise, though, Kieran, is how many of the current players at Manchester United are willing to stick around, given the wage bills that they are on. Because if we're not in Europe at all, I can imagine there's going to be quite a few wage cuts, especially the top players. I mean, you look at Casemiro, who I think will move on at the end of the season. He has the highest wage bill out of all the Manchester United players who are there. Marcus Rashford would be second, although he's out on loan at Aston Villa at the moment. But that's another decision United have got to make in the summer. I mean, I was saying this on a piece which I did, and I was thinking to myself, if you're going to bring academy players in, for instance, because that may be the route out of the situation. If you're going to bring academy players into the United first team, you're going to have to start capping wages that they earn per week. And I was saying no more than 100 grand a week, because if we are struggling for funds, then the wage cut has to be done to the players that we've got. And if they're not prepared to stick to it, given how badly they have performed over the course of the season, and maybe last season as well, some of these players, they need to be moved on. Save yourself the wage bills and start bringing players in on a smaller wage bill. And if they are performing, then at least you're getting value for money that way. It makes perfect sense doing it that way, as opposed to just keeping well-established players in there who are just not performing to the expectations which their contract says.
Also, as well, maybe we need to think about, not only offloading those players, but starting to pinpoint where those high wages came from. And there's a couple of players that have come through the club that have had the massive wages. But I think back to Alexis Sanchez, who was one that was an extortionate wage to bring him over from Arsenal. A big gamble that, if it had paid off, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we? But it didn't. And so his high wage almost spread around the squad of them asking, well, if he's on that wage, why don't I? I want a raise. You sign a player who is a good player. Sanchez was by no means a bad player. I think he was a good player, didn't work for United, but the knock-on effects of that means that we still have high wages for these players who aren't putting in the shifts at the moment. I mean, as we said, Casemiro, I've wanted to defend Casemiro so much, but recent performances have made me realise, no, he's not a good fit. The flashbacks of Casemiro and Eriksen against Newcastle ruining my Christmas still ring true. It's just a case of it's not for him, and he had a great season when he first arrived, just like Varane from Real Madrid. When we got those in a double swoop, it was almost like it was 10 years too late, even 5 years too late. But I think we've had a different strategy in this window. We've brought in the likes of Euro and Heaven for the future and could even play a role in the squad right now, such as the case of Patrick Dorgu, only 20 years old and starting for Manchester United now, and hopefully able to put in a role in that wing-back role. I think lessons have to be learned. It's not impossible to recover from a situation like this. We've seen teams, say Chelsea, they finished outside of the top 10 only a couple of seasons ago under new ownership, and now they're up there challenging for Europe again. So it's not impossible. You just have to spend lots of money and sign people on 9-year deals. Oh, no, UEFA FIFA outruled that, didn't they? Yeah, that's right. We can't do that anymore. Oh, well, we'll have to find a way back through, Tom?
Yeah. Well, what I will say is I'm just looking at the fixture list for United at the moment. So as far as the Premier League is concerned, they've got Tottenham away next, then Everton away. So we've got 2 away games next in the Premier League, and then we round off February with a home match against Ipswich. So you ask yourself the question, how many points do we get from those 3 games across the month? And bearing in mind, we've got the Europa League matches, which I think one of them is at the end of February, the other one being the following week, whoever we face. I think it's between AZ Alkmaar and Galatasaray or something like that we face in the last 16. Whoever wins in that preliminary knockout rounds, they'll be facing each other this month. And whoever we get in the FA Cup as well, because I think it comes around in the midweek again for the 5th round of the FA Cup, with there being no replays these days. So it's going to be quite a stacked schedule from the moment we kick off against Tottenham is underway. I don't know what to say, Kieran. It's just, it feels like we're going through this limbo of not really knowing what's going to happen. It's either we turn up and actually put in a reasonable performance, or it's just going to be a dog's dinner of a performance like we've seen time and time again over the course of this campaign.
Poor Niall's going to have to... Niall's been to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium about twice this season, and in both times he's been scorned by Manchester United results. Bless him, he's going to have to go through this again. Sorry, Niall, if you're listening. He's got a special shout out there. Speaking of shout outs, we're going to be back after this quick message. When we come back, maybe where do we go from here, and potentially who we'd like in that 5th round. Join us after this.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasts. With dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages, it's your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. So find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
We're number 1 in the hat. That's all I need to know. We're winning it. That's it. That's that. The current holders have number 1, of course. But a couple of teams that have been decided in there, obviously 16 teams in the hat, the round before the quarterfinals. A couple of decided fixtures need to happen. For example, number 5 is Exeter City or Nottingham Forest. Number 7 in the tie is Blackburn Rovers versus Wolves. Number 10, which is a match that's going on right now, Plymouth Argyle versus Liverpool. Number 12, Aston Villa versus Tottenham Hotspur. 15 is Doncaster Rovers or Crystal Palace. And then we've got number 2, Millwall. 3 is Brighton. 4 is Preston North End. 5 is, I've just said that, Exeter City on Forest. Ipswich Town is number 6. We've got Fulham at 8. Newcastle at 9. Number 11 is Bournemouth. 13 is Burnley, who managed to pull off that shock. I don't want them. We don't want a 0-0. Man City at 14. Cardiff City at 16. I'm looking at that. Manchester Derby's too early in the tie for me for 5th round. Tom, who are you looking at that sort of draw number? Who would you like?
I'm just looking at the results over the course of the weekend because I think there's still another game on Monday night in the FA Cup between Doncaster and Crystal Palace. It could well be Palace. I wouldn't mind Crystal Palace if I'm honest with you because I need to see us play against an opposition that has been relatively on form to see us try and progress against. Because let's be honest, I mean Arsenal. We got by Arsenal in the last round before we faced Leicester, and I thought, okay, we got through on merit in that one. But the performance, it kind of felt a bit average, but it was still decent enough to get through. And Leicester, I thought the performance against Leicester was worse, but somehow we still scraped through in that one. So if we get someone like Crystal Palace, then it's good. I know Crystal Palace have been a bit of a woe to us, but we're going to be going up against tough opposition at some point in the cup if we're going to go far.
But not Palace. That, like Jean-Philippe Mateta, that brace is still like burnt into my eyelids. I'm still seeing it as a sleep at night. I don't want Palace. No chance.
Well, if you're talking lower opposition who we could face, I mean, there's still Preston in there. There's Cardiff. Cardiff are still in there after their shootout win over Stoke yesterday. Brighton. I mean, Brighton are, they're a tricky one, Brighton. I mean, weirdly enough, I'm going to see Brighton take on Chelsea because I've got a friend of mine who's a Brighton and Hove Albion supporter, and I'm seeing them against Chelsea in a Premier League game on Friday night. So that'll be fun to watch because I've been to see Brighton play Ipswich with the friend of mine who is a Brighton fan. But going back to United's potential opponents, it really could be anyone. It's
going to be City, isn't it? It's going to be City.
It could well be City, but would you want them home or away?
Well, you'd always prefer it to be home. Always prefer it to be home. Well, yeah, we've won more games at home this season, so we've only won 2 away in the Premier League, so that sort of decides it for me.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's still Millwall left in the competition. I mean, there's not really that many lower league oppositions left in the competition now.
To expand what you said, Tom, we should be able to, whoever we come up against, we should be beating. Like, we should go into the mindset of, if we could draw any of these teams, we should be going to the quarterfinal. That's how you basically said it at the start of this when I asked you, who would you like? I suppose the question I should be asking is, who do you think will draw? And I'm going to put my hat in the ring and say it's probably going to be a Manchester derby for the 5th round. What do you reckon?
I'm going to remain on my instincts and say Crystal Palace.
Okay.
Well, be home or away, I'm not too fussed. What I want to see is a solid performance. I mean, there is a part of me that says I'd rather play them away because whenever we play at home, I just can't feel as comfortable. But whenever we play a team away from home, we somehow just turn it on a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, considering we've had more wins at home, that's an interesting thought process there, Tom. I suppose it's a case of maybe it feels a bit more secure when we're playing away rather than we're playing at home. But you're right. It just seems like the players get nervous in front of the home fans, but we've got a better home record than we have away. So it's, again, really limbo. That's why we're so far down the table. That would sum it up, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But yeah, hopefully, whoever we get, we just need to put in a solid performance. I think if we put in a solid performance or a run of solid performances on the lead up to the important games, like in the Cups, for instance, like in the Europa League, then the results will soon align with it.
Yeah, I agree. And you can let us know as well, how did we get it right? Did we get it massively wrong? I'm sure you'll be able to tell us who we got there. Of course, the draw happening after this podcast has been recorded, so don't come for us in the comments. Speaking of which, you can reach us out on social media. GSPN Man United. We are on X or Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're even on TikTok. Americans, it's still there for now. Don't worry, we'll still be there. We can also watch these episodes on YouTube. It's Global Sports Podcast Network Ltd is the YouTube channel, and find the Daily Manchester United podcast playlist, and you'll be able to watch us and our beautiful faces. Sorry about that. Tom, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show for the first time. How's it been?
It's been solid. It's nice to come away from motorsport a little bit for once, because I know I've been heavily involved in motorsport side of things for me a lot, especially this week, because I've been back at in Biggin Hill just to do some EVS training for when the season begins. But in relation to this, I've enjoyed it. You know, talking about a club which I've followed for over 20 years now, and I'm privileged enough to have lived through the better times, but I've been more used to the bad times. And I suppose sometimes when we're going through a really dogged period, I suppose you've got more to talk about, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. I've no notes, Tom. Well summed up. Thank you so much for listening as well. Have a great rest of your Monday. And let's hope the FA Cup treats us nicely so that we can have a nice route to the quarter-final. Watch out. There's an egg and it's going to land on my face. In the meantime, take care. Have a great rest of your Monday.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.